In the hot summer of 323 BC, the world held its breath. Alexander the Great, the man who had conquered the known world, lay dying at just 32 years old. His massive empire, stretching from Greece to India, was held together by his incredible willpower. But now that will was fading. His generals, men who had followed him through every kind of hardship, gathered in the palace. A single, terrifying question was on everyone's mind. Who would rule this world? The empire had no clear heir. Alexander's half-brother was mentally unfit to rule, and his own son had not yet been born. When his generals begged him to name a successor, the dying king whispered one final, fateful phrase, "Toe kratostoi," to the strongest. These words weren't a plan for the future. They were a curse that would lead to 40 years of war and bloodshed. The power vacuum he left was total, and his ambitious, ruthless commanders rushed to fill it. They called themselves the Diadochi, the Successors, and their brutal, backstabbing fight for the pieces of a shattered empire would redraw the map of the ancient world. It is from this chaotic time of ambition and war that an ancient text, a prophecy from the book of Daniel, begins to come true with shocking accuracy. This prophecy isn't vague. It lays out a detailed roadmap of the centuries to come, a blueprint for the age that would follow Alexander. It predicts the rise of two great rival powers from the ashes of his empire, a kingdom to the south and another to the north. This is the story of how that prophecy became history. It's the story of how the lives and deaths of kings, the fate of queens, and the clash of mighty armies followed a script that was seemingly written long before they were even born. This is the story of the kings of the south and the kings of the north.
The prophecy begins by introducing not one king, but two, and it makes an important distinction between them. The angel tells Daniel, "And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion." Daniel 11:5. History shows us exactly who these two men were. They were two of Alexander's most powerful generals, and their different ambitions would create the two most dominant powers of the era. The king of the south, Ptolemy I Soter, the cautious founder. The king of the south was Ptolemy, a Macedonian nobleman and one of Alexander's oldest and most trusted friends. While other generals were warriors, Ptolemy was a master politician, careful, calculating, and with a sharp eye for the future. Later, rumors would spread that he was an illegitimate son of Alexander's father, Philip II, which would have made him Alexander's half-brother. This was likely a story created to make his family's rule seem more legitimate. After Alexander's death, while other generals fought over the empire's heartland, Ptolemy made a brilliant move. He chose the greatest prize of all, Egypt. It was the oldest, richest, and most defensible province in the entire empire. Protected by vast deserts, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Nile River, Egypt was a natural fortress. Ptolemy's first major act of defiance was both bold and brilliant. Alexander's body, preserved in a magnificent golden coffin, was being carried back to Macedonia for burial. In the ancient world, having the body of the previous king was a powerful symbol of legitimacy. Ptolemy knew this. In 321 BC, as the funeral procession passed through Syria, he hijacked it and brought the conqueror's body to Egypt. He first buried Alexander in Memphis, the old capital, before the body was later moved to a grand tomb in the new capital, Alexandria. This single act was a declaration of independence and a political masterstroke. It enraged the empire's regent, Perdiccas, who invaded Egypt
only to be defeated and killed by his own men, an event where Ptolemy's rival, Seleucus, played a key role. With Alexander's body securing his right to rule and Egypt's endless wealth funding his plans, Ptolemy built a kingdom meant to last. He created an efficient government to manage the country's resources, making Egypt the richest of all the new kingdoms. He founded the Great Museum and Library of Alexandria, turning his capital into the intellectual and cultural center of the Greek world. Though he was a Greek ruling over Egyptians, he cleverly won over the local people by respecting their ancient religions and even created a new hybrid god, Serapis, to unite them. His power was built on wealth, security, and smart organization. His kingdom was, just as the prophecy said, incredibly strong. But the prophecy speaks of another man, one of his princes, who would become even stronger. This was Seleucus, a man whose destiny was shaped by exile and redeemed through pure, relentless ambition. Seleucus was the son of a general and had served Alexander as a commander of the elite Silver Shields infantry. Like Ptolemy, he was surrounded by legends that marked him for greatness. It was said his real father was the god Apollo, and that Seleucus was born with an anchor-shaped birthmark on his thigh. However, his start in the post-Alexander world was much rougher than Ptolemy's. He was given the territory of Babylonia, but his position was weak. In 316 BC, he was driven out by the most powerful of the successors, Antigonus the One-Eyed. Seleucus was forced to flee for his life with only 50 horsemen. He found safety, fatefully, at Ptolemy's court in Egypt. For 4 years, the future ruler of Asia was a landless exile, a subordinate commander serving the king of the south. He was, quite literally, one of his princes. The turning point came in 312 BC. Ptolemy, wanting to weaken their shared enemy Antigonus, made a crucial decision. He gave his exiled general, Seleucus, a small army, just 1,000 infantry and 300 cavalry, and sent him to reclaim his lost lands. What followed was one of the most amazing military careers in history. With this tiny, borrowed force, Seleucus not only retook the great city of Babylon, but launched a series of unstoppable campaigns to the east. For 7 years, he marched in Alexander's footsteps, reconquering the vast eastern lands of Persia, Media, Bactria, and pushing all the way to the Indus River. There, he clashed with the powerful new Mauryan Empire of India. In a historic treaty, Seleucus traded territory for a prize that would change the balance of power: 500 war elephants. These elephants were decisive. In 301 BC, at the Battle of Ipsus, the final showdown against Antigonus, it was Seleucus's wall of 400 elephants that trapped the enemy cavalry and secured a massive victory. 20 years later, in 281 BC, an elderly Seleucus faced his last great rival, Lysimachus of Thrace, at the Battle of Corupedium. Seleucus won again, killing Lysimachus and taking his lands in Asia Minor and Macedon. At that moment, Seleucus won Nicator. The victor was the master of almost all of Alexander's original empire, except for Egypt. His kingdom stretched from the Aegean Sea to the borders of India. The prophecy's wording is therefore incredibly precise. It doesn't just predict 2 powerful kings. It distinguishes between 2 kinds of power. Ptolemy's Egypt was strong, wealthy, organized, and secure. But the empire of Seleucus was a great dominion, a vast, continent-spanning territory that reshaped the world for generations, a perfect fulfillment of the prophecy.
The bitter rivalry between the Ptolemaic kings of the south and the Seleucid kings of the north didn't end with their founders. It was a conflict passed down to their children, a seemingly endless series of wars fought over the strategic lands of Koil, Syria, the region of modern Israel, Lebanon, and southern Syria. After decades of fighting, the next generation of kings tried a different approach. After the Second Syrian War, 260 to 253 BC, they attempted to make peace, not with swords, but with a marriage. It was a classic political move, but one that the book of Daniel predicted would end in total disaster. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. Daniel 11:6. The historical story of this verse is one of court intrigue, betrayal, and murder that plays out like a Greek tragedy, with every person involved meeting the exact fate that was foretold.
How dare you question the council?
The end of years refers to the time after the founding kings, Ptolemy I and Seleucus I. The war had been fought between their sons, Ptolemy II, Philadelphus of Egypt, and Antiochus II, Theos of the Seleucid Empire. Ptolemy II was a cultured ruler, more interested in art and diplomacy than war. He oversaw the golden age of Alexandria, finishing his father's great library and lighthouse. But he wasn't as tough a military leader as his father. His rival, Antiochus II, was a stronger personality, but was known for his decadent lifestyle and was easily influenced by his favorites. He earned the title Theos, meaning the god, for freeing a city from a tyrant, but ancient writers also describe him as a heavy drinker.
To seal the peace after a long and expensive war, a dramatic deal was made. Antiochus II agreed to a shocking condition. He would divorce his first wife, Laodice I, and disinherit their two sons. Laodice was not a woman to be taken lightly. She was Antiochus's cousin, a powerful noblewoman with her own vast lands and a great deal of political influence. Pushing her aside was a risky move. In her place, Antiochus would marry the king's daughter of the south, a princess named Berenice, the daughter of Ptolemy II. In 252 BC, Berenice traveled to the Seleucid capital. She brought such a huge treasure as her dowry that she was nicknamed Phernophorus, the dower bringer. Her protective father even had water from the Nile River bottled and sent with her so she would never have to drink from a foreign source. For a short time, it seemed peace was finally achieved. But the prophecy predicted a complete and total failure, and history confirms it, detail by meticulous detail. The verse isn't just a vague prediction of failure. It's a step-by-step forecast of the grim fate of every single person involved. The first to fall was Berenice herself. The prophecy said, "But she shall not retain the power of the arm." Berenice's power as queen depended entirely on two men, her husband, Antiochus II, and her powerful father in Egypt. In the fateful year of 246 BC, her father, Ptolemy II, died. With her main supporter gone, Berenice's influence vanished. Antiochus II, perhaps tired of the Egyptian alliance or persuaded by the scorned and ambitious Laodice, quickly left Berenice and their infant son in the capital, Antioch, and returned to his first wife in Ephesus. Berenice's power, her arm, was broken. Next, the prophecy turned to her husband. Neither shall he stand, nor his arm. Laodice was a woman of incredible ruthlessness. Fearing that the unpredictable Antiochus might change his mind again and go back to Berenice, she took the final step to secure her son's inheritance. In that same year, 246 BC, shortly after he returned to her, Antiochus II died suddenly. Most ancient historians agree that Laodice poisoned him, so he did not stand. His arm, meaning his child and heir through Berenice, was also cut off. Laodice sent assassins who murdered Berenice's infant son, the child who was supposed to be the next king. The prophecy then predicts the fate of the queen and her followers. But she shall be given up, and they that brought her. When Berenice heard of Antiochus's death, she knew her life was in grave danger. She and her child fled to a fortified compound near Antioch. Her loyal Egyptian attendants and guards, they that brought her, rushed to defend her. An international crisis broke out as cities across Asia, loyal to the Ptolemaic princess, sent help. But it was too late. Laodice's assassins couldn't take the fortress by force, so they used trickery to get inside. In the fight that followed, many of Berenice's attendants were killed trying to protect her before she too was brutally murdered. She was given up. The final part of the prophecy is about Berenice's father, Ptolemy II, and he that begat her. The text includes the one who begat her and had been her strength among the fallen. As history confirms, he died in that same disastrous year, 246 BC, which left him powerless to step in and save his daughter from her terrible end. The death of Ptolemy II was the event that set the whole tragedy in motion. His death removed Berenice's political protection, which led Antiochus to leave her. This pushed Laodice to secure her position through murder, first of Antiochus, and then of his heir by Berenice. This in turn led directly to the siege and murder of Berenice herself.
The brutal murder of a Ptolemaic princess and her baby son was more than a family tragedy. It was an act of war. The insult to Egyptian honor could not be ignored, and a new king in the south was ready to make them pay a terrible price. The prophecy continues, predicting a swift and powerful response from Berenice's own family. But out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail, and shall also carry captives into Egypt their gods, with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and of gold. And he shall continue more years than the king of the north. So the king of the south shall come into his kingdom and shall return into his own land. The branch of her roots is a clear reference to Berenice's brother, who came from the same family root. This was Ptolemy III Euergetes, who had just become king of Egypt after his father's death in 246 BC. Furious over the murder of his sister, he immediately gathered the full military power of the Ptolemaic Empire to get his revenge. The war he started is known to history as the Third Syrian War, or more fittingly, the Laodicean War, 246 to 241 BC. His campaign was a huge success, fulfilling the prediction that he would come with an army and shall prevail. He swept into the Seleucid Empire, which was now ruled by Laodice's son, Seleucus II. Ptolemy III's armies didn't just take back a few border towns, they conquered with incredible speed and on a massive scale. He captured the Seleucid capital of Antioch and pushed deep into enemy territory. Clay tablets discovered by modern archaeologists confirm just how far his invasion went, proving that his armies reached the ancient cities of Babylon and Susa, deep in Mesopotamia. He took control of vast territories, including Syria, Cilicia, and valuable ports along the coast of Asia Minor. The Seleucid Kingdom was completely humbled. The prophecy also describes the specific things he would take. He would carry captives into Egypt, their gods, with their precious vessels of silver and of gold. This is exactly what happened. Ptolemy III stripped the Seleucid lands of their wealth, carrying away a massive treasure of 40,000 talents of silver, precious vessels, and around 2,500 statues of various gods. But among these statues was a collection that had a special and deep meaning. Centuries earlier, in 525 BC, the Persian king Cambyses II had conquered Egypt and looted its most sacred temples, taking its divine images to Persia. Ptolemy III found these ancient Egyptian gods and brought them home. This was a brilliant move of political and religious propaganda. The Ptolemies, after all, were a foreign Greek dynasty ruling a proud and ancient people. By returning the long-lost gods, Ptolemy III wasn't acting like a Greek conqueror, but like a true Egyptian pharaoh, a pious restorer of tradition and national pride. The native Egyptian priests and people were thrilled. For this act, they gave him the title Ergetes, which means the Benefactor. This popular support made his position at home secure, just as the prophecy predicted he would return into his own land, after being called back to Egypt to deal with a rebellion. This internal stability, strengthened by his popular religious act, allowed his kingdom to prosper. His reign was long and stable, while his Seleucid enemies were torn apart by internal problems, including a devastating civil war between Seleucus II and his own brother. Thus, he did continue more years than the king of the north, ruling in peace while his enemies destroyed their own kingdom. The prophecy's specific mention of carrying away their gods points directly to the very act that secured Ptolemy III's power at home and ensured the long-term stability of his reign. The cycle of violence wasn't over. The humiliation of the Laodicean War was a sore spot in the Seleucid court for a generation. The sons of Seleucus II were determined to take back their ancestral lands and restore their family's honor. The prophecy foretells the rise of a new, powerful king from the north and the massive battle that would follow. But his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north, and he shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand. The sons of Seleucus II were Seleucus III and his younger brother Antiochus III. The older son had a short and unsuccessful reign before he was assassinated by his own officers. It was the younger son, the one who would certainly come, who would change history. This was Antiochus III, a man of incredible energy and ambition who would later be called the Great. Determined to change his family's fortunes, he started the Fourth Syrian War,
219 to 217 BC. His armies overflowed back into the disputed territory of Coele-Syria, crushing Ptolemaic defenses and pushing all the way to the border of Egypt, his fortress. The king of the south at this time was Ptolemy IV Philopator, a ruler known more for his wild lifestyle than his military skill. The historian Polybius paints a harsh picture of a king who loved drinking and partying, and who had mostly ignored his duties as king. But as Antiochus's successful invasion threatened Egypt itself, even the lazy Ptolemy IV was finally moved with choler, stirred to furious action. The stage was set for one of the biggest battles of the ancient world. In the summer of 217 BC, near the border town of Raphia, two great multitudes faced each other on a dusty plain. Antiochus III commanded a powerful Seleucid army, while Ptolemy IV led an even larger Ptolemaic force. The scale of the battle was huge, a true clash of titans.
The battle began with a dramatic and terrifying clash of war elephants. As Polybius wrote, Antiochus's larger, more aggressive Indian elephants charged Ptolemy's smaller African elephants. The Ptolemaic elephants, likely the now extinct North African forest elephant, panicked at the sight, sound, and smell of their larger opponents. They turned and crashed back through their own lines, causing chaos and confusion on Ptolemy's left flank. Antiochus III, a brilliant commander leading his cavalry from the right wing, seized the opportunity. He smashed into the disordered Ptolemaic flank and completely shattered it. At this moment, the great Seleucid king was winning a decisive victory. The battle seemed to be over. But the prophecy stated that the northern king's army would be given into his hand, that is, into the hand of the southern king. The fulfillment of this prediction came down to a single fatal mistake. Antiochus III, in his moment of triumph, made a classic military error. Believing the battle was won, he personally led the chase of the fleeing enemy, riding far from the main battlefield and losing control of his army. This gave Ptolemy IV, who had been caught up in the retreat, a crucial chance. He managed to escape, ride back to the center of his line, and rally his main infantry phalanx. Strengthened by the 20,000 native Egyptians trained to fight in the Macedonian style, a desperate move to get enough soldiers, the Ptolemaic center smashed into the now leaderless Seleucid phalanx and broke it. By the time Antiochus III returned from his premature victory chase, his army was in full retreat. The great army of the north had been defeated, delivered into the hands of the king of the south, just as Daniel had written.
A great victory on the battlefield should make a king's rule stronger, secure his borders, and bring glory to his kingdom. But the prophecy for Ptolemy IV Philopator contained a strange and dark twist. After his stunning, come-from-behind victory at Raphia, the text says that he would not be strengthened by it.
And when he hath taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it.
Daniel 11:12. History shows that the victory at Raphia, instead of strengthening the Ptolemaic kingdom, was the very thing that set it on a path to internal collapse. The prophecy foretold not just the event, but its deeply ironic and destructive long-term result. First, the text says, "His heart shall be lifted up." Ptolemy IV's pride grew enormously after his unexpected win. Historians like Polybius describe a man whose arrogance was as great as his laziness. Instead of chasing the defeated Antiochus and using his advantage to secure a lasting peace, Ptolemy quickly made a treaty so he could rush back to Alexandria and get back to his life of partying and excess. His pride took him on a victory tour, which included a stop in Jerusalem. There, impressed by the beauty of the Jewish temple, he arrogantly demanded to enter the most holy place, a sacred space that only the high priest could enter, and only once a year. The apocryphal book of 3 Maccabees tells the story, describing how, as he tried to force his way in, he was struck down by a mysterious paralysis and had to be carried away, deeply humiliated. Next, the prophecy states, "And he shall cast down many 10,000s." Burning with rage from his public humiliation in Jerusalem, Ptolemy took out his anger on the large and prosperous Jewish community in his own capital, Alexandria. He started a horrific persecution, a brutal attack in which tens of thousands of Jewish citizens were massacred. Ancient writers give numbers ranging from 40,000 to 60,000 killed, a shocking number that would have terrified the city and turned a large and historically respected part of its population against him.
Finally, the prophecy delivers its crucial insight, but he shall not be strengthened by it. The victory at Raphia and the terrible acts that followed did not make Ptolemy stronger. They fatally weakened his kingdom from the inside. The chain of events is clear and devastating. The very decision that won him the battle became the cause of his kingdom's downfall. To fight the massive Seleucid army, Ptolemy had taken the unprecedented step of arming and training some 20,000 native Egyptians as phalanx soldiers. This solved his short-term soldier problem and won him the battle. But these men did not simply go back to their farms. They returned home as trained, battle-hardened veterans with a new sense of confidence and pride. They had faced the best of the Seleucid army and won. When they looked at their own king, a corrupt, lazy foreigner who was now persecuting his own subjects, they saw weakness and felt anger. This anger exploded into the Great Revolt, 206 to 186 BC. For 2 decades, Upper Egypt completely broke away from Ptolemaic control, ruled by its own native pharaohs, Hieronyphus and Choniphorus. The rebellion drained the treasury, ruined the economy, and shattered the kingdom's internal stability. The victory at Raphia, therefore, directly planted the seeds of civil war. Ptolemy IV won the battle, but began the process of losing his kingdom. He was not strengthened by it, he was nearly destroyed.
The 14 years after the Battle of Raphia were not a time of peace, but a time when the 2 rival kingdoms went in very different directions. While the Ptolemaic Kingdom was falling apart from the inside, its rival was being rebuilt through constant warfare. The prophecy accurately captures this dramatic shift in power, predicting the return of a much stronger northern king. "For the king of the north shall return, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches." The phrase "after certain years" perfectly matches the 14-year truce between the 2 empires, from 217 to 203 BC. For Ptolemy IV, these were years of decline. For Antiochus III, they were years of non-stop action and rebuilding. Humiliated at Raphia, he turned his attention away from Egypt and began a legendary 7-year military expedition to the east, known as his Anabasis, 212 to 205 BC, to reclaim the broken eastern parts of his empire.
This was the campaign that truly earned him the title the Great. He marched his armies through Parthia and Bactria, modern Iran and Afghanistan, crushing rebellions and forcing local rulers to submit to him. He followed in the footsteps of Alexander the Great, crossing the Hindu Kush Mountains into India, where he renewed alliances and got a new supply of war elephants. These campaigns were incredibly successful. They filled his treasuries with vast wealth, much riches. And, more importantly, they turned his army into a massive, battle-hardened, and loyal fighting force, a multitude greater than the former.
While Antiochus was growing stronger, his rival was drinking himself to death. In 204 BC, Ptolemy IV died from his life of excess. He left the throne of a broken and rebellious kingdom to his son, Ptolemy V Epiphanes, a boy who was only 5 or 6 years old. The court in Alexandria fell into a chaotic and bloody power struggle between corrupt regents who quickly had the boy king's mother, Arsinoe III, murdered to secure their own power. And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. The prophecy foretold that many would rise up against the weakened southern kingdom, and history confirms a perfect storm of enemies. The chaos in Alexandria under the regent Agathocles sparked rebellions across the Ptolemaic lands. Seeing this weakness, Antiochus III formed a bandits' alliance with King Philip V of Macedon to systematically take over the Ptolemaic overseas territories. These were the many who stood up against the boy king of the south. But the verse introduces a new, dangerous player, the robbers of thy people. This is a reference to a new power rising in the west, a kingdom that had been slowly growing in strength and ambition, the Roman Republic. Far away on the Tiber River, this warlike state was now making its power felt in the east. In 200 BC, Rome stepped in on behalf of the young Ptolemy V, warning Antiochus and Philip to keep their hands off Egypt, which was becoming a vital source of grain for Rome. This was one of Rome's first major interventions in the region. Their arrival on the scene as a power that would eventually conquer all the others is what establishes the vision, bringing the ultimate subject of Daniel's later prophecies onto the world stage. So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. Antiochus III, at the peak of his power, launched the Fifth Syrian War, 202 to 195 BC. The Ptolemaic court, in desperation, sent their best general, a famous mercenary named Scopas, to defend their lands. Scopas, the chosen general of the south, initially had some success, reconquering Judea for Egypt. But Antiochus, leading his veteran army, met Scopas near the Jordan River at the Battle of Panium in 200 BC. The result was a disaster for Egypt. The Ptolemaic army was destroyed. Scopas and what was left of his forces, about 10,000 men, fled to the heavily fortified coastal city of Sidon, one of the most fenced cities of the time. Antiochus besieged the city, and even though Egypt sent its best generals to help, the arms of the south could not hold out. Facing starvation, Scopas was forced to surrender on the dishonorable terms of being allowed to live, and he and his men were sent away stripped and naked. The great province of Colosyria, including Judea, was permanently lost to Egypt. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him. And he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. The prophecy now takes a dramatic turn. The king of the north, Antiochus III, was victorious over the south, but a new power was coming against him. While Antiochus could defeat the Egyptians, he could not stand before the Romans. His expansion in the Greece brought him into direct conflict with the Republic, and he was crushed at the Battle of Magnesia in 190 BC. The humiliating Treaty of Apamea stripped him of his lands in Asia Minor and his war elephants, crippling the Seleucid Empire and ending its time as a major power. The one who came against the king of the north did as he pleased. The focus of the prophecy then shifts to this new power and its relationship with the glorious land, Judea. The oppression of a later Seleucid king, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, sparked the Maccabean revolt. This fight for independence led the Jewish leaders to seek an alliance with the rising power of Rome. In 161 BC, the first Roman-Jewish treaty was signed, a formal agreement of friendship that brought Rome into the political affairs of Judea as a protector. This relationship came to a head a century later. In 63 BC, a civil war over the throne of Judea broke out between two brothers, Hyrcanus II and Aristobulus II. Both appealed to the Roman general Pompey the Great, who was campaigning in the east. Siding with Hyrcanus, Pompey marched on Jerusalem. When the supporters of Aristobulus fortified themselves on the Temple Mount, Pompey laid siege to it. After 3 months, his legions broke through the walls and stormed the sacred area, killing 12,000 people in the process. Pompey then did what was, to the Jews, the ultimate act of disrespect. He walked into the temple and entered the most holy place, a room no one but the high priest was allowed to enter. To his surprise, he found the room empty. There was no idol, no image of the Jewish God. Though he did not steal the temple's treasures, his act marked the end of Jewish independence. Judea became a client kingdom of the Roman Republic. For the first time, Rome stood by conquest in the glorious land, a rule that would last for centuries and would ultimately see that land consumed in the devastating Jewish-Roman wars that were to come. The prophecy had perfectly tracked the great power shift of the age, from the rivalry of Alexander's successors to the dawn of Roman power.